on Shabbat. They made an injunction: you can't take a bath on Shabbat. So we'll have to see what the story is. What type of bathhouse was it? So let's take a look. We are on Mem Amid Beis. We are on 40b. Let's take a look. Let's start from that piece. 40b2 on the bottom of the page. Amar Reb Yitzchak bar Avdimi, the 6 lines at the bottom. 40b2. Amar Reb Yitzchak bar Avdimi. Pam achat nichnas li acha Rebbe lebeit hamechas. One time, I followed Rebbe into the bathhouse. Now we're talking about this is a bathhouse that's supplied by the springs of Tiberia, right? Because if it was not supplied by the springs of Tiberia, you wouldn't be able to go into that bathhouse. Good morning, Mark.
Morning, Rabbi.
Okay, so Rabbi Yitzchak says, one time I went to the followed Rebbe to the bathhouse on Shabbat. It was the natural springs of Tiberia, which we said the rabbis did not forbade bathing in the natural springs of Tiberia because it's not heated by natural means, that there's be a concern that you might come to stoke the fire. It's natural.
Because the people couldn't tolerate it. That's why.
But that's why they couldn't tolerate the decree, that they also made a decree against those springs. They made a decree against them, and they pulled back, and they said you could go ahead and use those springs. And they differentiated between springs that are naturally heated, and like the springs of Tiberia, and springs that you heat up. The springs that you heat up is more of a concern. You're actually going to go ahead and heat it up on the Shabbat. So I followed Rebbe to the Beit HaMerchas on Shabbat. Bikashti laniach lo pachshel shemen ba'ambati, and I wanted to place a jug of oil in one of the pools that the water would gather. I wanted to put a jug of oil there to go ahead and to take off some of the coldness of the oil. I wanted to heat it up so Rebbe could use it. And Ali, and he told me, Tol Biklisheni. If you're gonna go ahead and you want to go ahead and put this oil into you can't put the oil which is in the jar into this water bath of the Tiberia. You're heating, and they have to go ahead and take some of the water of the Tiberia, place the water, which is, let's say, the natural spring is, let's say, Rishon. The natural source of the water is like a Kli Rishon. Take the water, put into a cup, put into a different utensil, and the walls of the utensil will cool down some of the heat of the water. And then you can once you put the water of the Tiberia into a second cup, a second keli, then you could put the jug of oil into that. And the Gemara is going to say, because the klisheni, the second utensil, will not have the ability to cook. So that's what he says here. That's what he told them to do. So the Gemara says, Shema mina tlat. We learn out three laws from this story. From the story that Rebbe said, and therefore, by the way, when you hang out with the rabbis, you learn different things, right? You see how the rabbis conducted himself. This rabbi wanted to put the oil into a flask, into the waters of the Tiberia waters. The rabbi said, you can't do it. Shema mina shemen yesh bo mishum bishul. Remember, we had the discussion earlier, shemen subject to the prohibition of cooking, because maybe oil, it's used in its state of raw, and the cooking doesn't really improve it much, right? So we had a discussion before, is oil subject to cooking on Shabbat? And we see that he holds that it is Rebbe holds that it is subject to cooking, because Rebbe says you have to go ahead and make sure you don't cook up the oil. You have to make sure you put it into a kli sheni. Ushmamina. Also, we learn out that kli sheni in mevashel, that the fact that if you put it into a kli sheni, if you put it into a second utensil, we say that does not have the ability to cook, because he just told them to put it into a second utensil. Now, we said, or we've learned earlier that the rule of kli sheni einim mevashel, that a second utensil doesn't cook, does not, morning asaf, does not apply to all foods. There are certain foods that a kli sheni has the ability to cook. Those are called kalei bishul, things that are easy, to be cooked. Like there's a concern of tea leaves, right? Tea leaves, we're concerned that maybe they are items that are easy. Good morning, Simon. Welcome back. Maybe tea leaves are things that are easy to be cooked. Therefore, we don't put tea leaves in a kli sheni. We don't just say take the water from the urn and put it into a cup, and then put the tea leaves into that. Rather, we say put the water from the urn into cup number one, right, Adam? And then cup number one, you pour into cup number two, and then you put the tea leaves in. But regarding oil is one of those things that we say will not cook in a kli sheni, in a second utensil. And Tosfos asked the question, how does that work? What does it mean that a second utensil does not cook if it's not in the original sauce? So Tosfos says because the first utensil, the first utensil, the urn or whatever, that the tea kettle, because it was on the fire, it makes the walls hot and it keeps the heat in for a very long time. Therefore, we say as long as it's yad saletet bo, as long as that water, the heat of that water that you cooked, it's in the original sauce. If it's still yad saletet, you can't put your finger in it. Your finger you'll move your finger back. That means it still has the ability of cooking. But a kli sheni, once you took it out of its original sauce and you poured it into another cup, and that cup was not the original sauce. It was those walls were not heated up. Those walls were cold. So those walls will cool off the water, and even though it is yad saletet, even though it's still that hot, the water in that second utensil is very hot. Nevertheless, it is permitted, because since the walls are just cooling off the water. So then the Gemara says, the third thing we learn is Shema Mina Hefshiro Zeo Bishulo. That warming up is like the cooking, warming up oil, because Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Avdimi was not interested in cooking the oil. He just wanted to take off the chill. He wanted to warm up the oil, wanted to warm the oil up, and he just wanted to warm them up, and yet he says you can't do that unless you do it in a kli sheni to ensure that you're not cooking. But which would indicate that just warming would be a problem, because if warming is not cooking, so then he should have allowed you to warm. So the Gemara says, how could Rebbe do this? I mean, Rebbe went ahead. Rebbe told Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Avdimi. He told them, what did he tell them? Remember, Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Avdimi, we are now on 40. Simon, we are on 40b3. We're on it's like the second big paragraph on the page, second wider paragraph. Heichi Ovid Hachi. How did Rebbe give him instructions in the bathhouse of what to do with the oil, with the jug of oil? Meaning, Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Avdimi wanted to place the jug of oil in the waters of, let's say, the bath of the Tiberia, from Tiberia, and Rebbe says you have to use a klisheni, you have to use a second utensil. You can't use the original waters. But how did he tell him that? V'hama Rabbi Bachana Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Bachana said, Rabbi Yochanan, b'chol mokum mudal ha'er. You could think Torah, all places you could think Torah, chutz li beis hamerchas lebeis hakisei. But if you're in a bathroom or you're in a bathhouse is not a clean place. People are undressed, right? It's a place where people are undressed. It's not so clean, a lot of sweat, and therefore you're not allowed to even think Torah in such a place, in a dirty place. So since he can't think Torah in a dirty place, how could the rabbi tell him to use a kli sheni? By telling him use a second utensil, he's obviously using Torah thought. He's saying he's sharing an idea of Torah with the person that's based on, why is he telling him use a second utensil? He's obviously, because, if you just say use a second utensil because you want to go ahead and for mundane purposes, just nothing to do with Torah, but that's not why he said use a second. The reason why he told him use a kli sheni, even though those are not words of Torah in itself. He tells someone put it into a second utensil. That doesn't mean Torah. It could be anything. But it's obvious on Shabbat you're telling him to put the oil jar with the oil inside of it into a kli sheni, into a second utensil, is because obviously you're saying, because that will make sure that won't cook it. So you're thinking the idea behind, the thought behind those words is Torah. So therefore, that's why the Gemara says, morning mark, because why does it say you can't think, you're allowed to, the Gemara could have said you can't talk Torah. Why does the Gemara have to say every place you could think Torah, except you can't talk Torah in a bathhouse? But here it's maybe the word itself, perhaps, I'm thinking, is not in itself indicating words of Torah. It's just that the thought, he didn't say a pasuk in the Torah, it says use a second utensil. But the thought behind it is Torah, and therefore it should be a problem.
The thought of Rebbe.
The thought of Rebbe, why is Rebbe telling him use a second utensil? That in itself is not words of Torah. If I tell you use a second, anytime you use a second utensil, but what's his thinking? Why is he saying that? He's obviously thinking Torah.
Well, why are they assuming that Rebbe's going through like an analysis and said maybe he didn't think at all?
You can't. You won't be able. He's telling him, he's instructing him to do that. Obviously, because of Torah law, that second utensil is not cooking. That's his rationale behind it. Or else, leave the man alone. Leave the guy alone if the guy wants to put how he wants to do it. That's obviously, Adam. He's not leaving the rabbi alone and telling him do it this way and not that way, not the way you want to do it. It's obvious because his Torah ideas running through his head.
You're not supposed to
think Torah in a bathhouse. It's a dirty place. Same way you think. Same thing. Same thing in a bathroom. You can't think Torah. We said a lot of rabbis have the trouble. A lot of other people don't have that trouble. We spoke about it once, but we hope this is a problem that everyone should have. But you understand what I'm saying. But the point is,
he had to think Torah to tell him not to do it.
Right. So it's obviously he's thinking Torah.
So
that's the most question is. Shouldn't that be a problem? You can't think Torah. Meaning what? The man doing the wrong thing? Very good. So Mark is saying, which the Gemara is going to answer, to prevent the other person from doing something wrong. That's the answer. But I found there's an interesting comment. The Torah talks about
I imagine there's also a level. You get the oil from that, but I imagine there's a level of. You tell him not to do that. Doing something
right,
something that's forbidden.
right.
Maybe something that's not so bad. You shouldn't have done.
You shouldn't what?
You shouldn't do.
Shouldn't say, or you shouldn't
Think and say.
Okay, but if it's something wrong, if it's wrong, again, mean, if
Sur.
if it's a sur, if what's the sur? The thing that guy is doing or thinking of Torah? Which point? Right, exactly. That's what he said. It's a sur. It's forbidden, and therefore he's telling him.
Maybe something not so machmir or something not so serious.
Right. So you're saying, Mark, you're saying maybe if something is a stringency, maybe better don't say anything if it's going to
If you want me to do a left shoe, then die your left shoe, die your right shoe. Not so serious.
Yeah, okay, but you have to know if once it's a halacha.
That's not a halacha.
I mean, it's brought down. We have
Is
to.
it a sur to put-
I'm not saying it's a sur, but we have to know. But
So maybe I'm trying to get to that is a thing. You're saying at some level.
right, it might be a different calculation. What's
it
more?
may
What's
be better.
say nothing.
Say nothing. Don't think about that. You're in the bathroom. The bathhouse.
Okay, so let's okay. At least the case that we see was it was a halacha, right? Right. So the Gemara says that I saw it's interesting. It says one of the commentaries say that that the Jewish people are they're constantly thinking Torah, and therefore therefore the Torah talks about making sure if you go to the bathroom, you cover it up, don't because you have to keep the camp holy. The camp is holy, and the idea is you always got to keep it clean because it's not you're constantly people are thinking Torah. So I like that idea.
You have the problem. Not that you wash because when you wash it, you think it's gone up.
Good point. So that's why maybe it's important that the thing should be clean. Maybe at least flush the toilet beforehand. Maybe that would be better. So it's right. So it's more clean. The area is more clean. So the Gemara says. So I like that idea that Jewish people are always thinking Torah, and therefore you have to make sure the camp is always clean. If people are not always thinking Torah, only at certain times, so you don't have to be as concerned. But the fact that they're always thinking Torah. Now, so the Gemara says, maybe he told them in non-Hebrew language, right? Maybe is there a difference? Are you going to suggest that the prohibition of Torah, the prohibition of Torah, of thinking Torah, is when you're thinking? See, the Gemara says maybe he told them in another language. So obviously, you can still ask the question, even if he told them another language, he's still thinking Torah, right? But maybe the prohibition is since he told them in a different language and not in Lashon Kodesh, so maybe you're actually thinking in another language, right? If you talk English, what are you thinking? You're thinking in Hebrew, you're thinking in English. So we're thinking in English. So maybe the thinking of Torah is only problem only if you're thinking in Hebrew, and therefore, and you're saying it, and then he said it in Hebrew, he thought it in Hebrew, it's a problem. But if he's not thinking in Hebrew, he's thinking in some other language, maybe it's not a problem to think Torah if you're thinking in another language. Simon,
they give the Torah 70 languages.
Right.
What language do you think in? When I talk to you now in English, you think in English. But I respond instantly. Yeah, I think on both.
When he's in Israel, he thinks in Hebrew. When he's here, he thinks in right? You might be in a different mindset.
You see, with the Israelis,
You're thinking in Hebrew.
even though we speak in English, we're thinking Hebrew. Because, there's vocabulary that you can relate to Israeli that they will understand that if I tell you, you won't know what does it mean. No, I think mostly in English.
So the Gemara says it doesn't make a difference. You can talk if you're thinking in Chinese. If you're thinking Torah, you're thinking Torah. Torah is Torah in all Islamic 70 languages. It's Torah, right? You're thinking Torah. It doesn't make it. As long as you're thinking Torah. So therefore, it's holy. It's holy in any language, and therefore you can't be thinking in Chinese in the bathroom.
Lavatory, you leave the lavatory, you say, I show you outside the lavatory, of course. The door and lavatory have to be closed.
I would think if you shouldn't be, I don't think you should be facing it.
No.
But morning, but if you're not facing it, our bathrooms are clean. I don't know. I don't think it's such a problem. But that's what I would think. If you're not facing it, our bathrooms are clean. If the bathroom, if the person didn't flush the toilet, then then that would be a problem. But if you're not facing it, what,
You're saying it when you get out.
Of course, out, but out, the door has to be closed or the door doesn't have to be closed.
you definitely have to be looking the other way, opposite direction.
Okay.
Now, so the Gemara says, "Va'ama Abaye." Abaye says, "Dvarim shachol mutar la'omram l'shakodesh." If a person is in a bathhouse and you want to talk, if you could talk Hebrew, if you're talking about you're talking about who won the Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? You could talk Super Bowl talk in the bathhouse in Hebrew, but you can't talk Torah in Chinese in the bathhouse. Of a kodesh asal omrim b'shachol. He doesn't care. It's not about the language, but the Torah. Right. It's the content. A lot of people make that mistake. They make the language into the religion. Instead of, there are a lot of Israelis that think, as long as I talk Hebrew, that's enough. I feel my responsibility as a Jew. You know what I'm saying? And that's not the way. That's not gonna do it for them. So he says, "Shakodesh asalomrim b'lashachol." If it's kodesh, you can't say it in any language. That means even if you're thinking, and also the Gemara's understanding, this, it's all about the thinking of the Torah. So the Gemara says, "A frushe me surah shiny." It's like Mark was indicating before. It's one thing. Good morning, David. It's one thing. I can't think Torah in a bathhouse, but if I need to stop a person from doing sin because he was about to do something on Shabbat that was forbidden, he was going to be heating up this flask of oil. So that he went ahead and he told him not to do that. Now, one of the Ramban, the Rajba, the Ritva, they want to say the Gemara never thought that it's more important to don't say anything. We're talking about David, someone's in the bathhouse and you're with someone else and he's about to do a sin. Do you say something? You don't say something because you're not supposed to think Torah in the bathhouse. So the Gemara never thought that law of not saying Torah in the bathhouse would trump stopping someone from doing a sin. I mean, the Gemara definitely knew that you would have to go ahead and stop the guy, but there's a way of stopping a guy. Maybe you could just say, don't do it. You don't have to say, but he gave him more details. He told him, use a kli. He already gave him, use a second utensil, which is already more of a intellectual, deeper, is a more, you hear what Mark is saying? That, the Gemara thought, of course you got to stop a guy from doing the sin. But you don't have to go ahead and say, use a kli, use a second utensil. Just say, don't do it. Don't do that. By saying the word use a kli, you're getting into more. So that's what the Gemara said, and the Gemara's conclusion is that he felt it was better to, if I would just go ahead and say, don't do it, the person might make a mistake to think you don't want me to get busy for you, like not necessary. But if you say it's not necessary, the guy might still make the mistake and do it. So therefore, it's better. He's not saying you have to tell him why, but you have to say it in a way that the person is not going to do it anyways. So if you go and say, if I say,
if you tell me don't do it just because I doing, I'm not doing anything.
Right, that's what he's saying. Meaning, I, I came to the bathhouse. The rabbi, I wanted to warm this up for the rabbi. I wanted to warm the oil up for the rabbi. If you tell me, Mayor, don't do it. So what will I say? You don't want me to get busy for you, and therefore I still might go ahead and do it. So therefore, it's better to give him a little bit more information, even though because he still might do it if you don't give him the more information. Exactly right. Exactly that's one approach, and therefore you want to stop the guy from a sin. You could if you what you can say as much as you need to say, you know to stop him from the sin. Teda, and the Gemara brings the proof. We have another story. The Amar of Yehuda Mashmuel. Ma'aseh b'talmidah Rav Meir. There was a story with the student of Rav Meir. Shenichlas achar of the Beis Hamrachas. He followed him. He went to the bathhouse. Obviously, most probably he's there to help his rabbi. So he followed the student, went to help Rav Meir, to be there to serve him, whatever is necessary. Ubikish ladiach karka, and he wanted to go ahead and wash the floor, the ground of the bathhouse for Rameya, and Rameya said, Rameya said, "Emadichin, you can't wash the ground on Shabbat." Now, what was some of the issues that they had in dirt floors? So if you have a dirt floor, maybe there's a concern that when you wash the floor, if you see the floor is not exactly straight, some holes, you might come to fill in the gaps, and that will be a problem on Shabbat. Like if you do that in the house, there'll be a problem of building, and if you do it in the field, that might be an issue of plowing. So the rabbi told him, Rabbi Meir said, don't do it. And then losuch as a karka, then he wanted to go ahead and smear the ground with also do something on the ground to smear it with something. So with oil, usually it's done with oil, because it says over here that when an honored person would come to the bathhouse, they would go ahead and close the regular holes of the bath where the water would enter, and they would open up the side. They open up the side, the hole that was on the side. The water should go there, and they would do that to clean the ground, and they would go ahead and they would go ahead and also put water, certain types of water, special water that has a very beautiful fragrance, and they would go ahead and use that also, smear some type of stuff also to give a nice smell. And he told them, you can't do that. You can't smear the ground. Because again, if you're going to smear the ground of this bathhouse, you might come to also fix holes. So again, Rameya told him, don't do it. And obviously Rameya told him not to do it. It's obviously because there's a problem, there's a Shabbat problem you can't do this on Shabbat because the rabbis are concerned you might come to, fill gaps of holes. Same problem. So we see, same proof. Alma Fusheme Surashini. So we see that separating a person from doing sin on Shabbat, you could go ahead and even think Torah. So here also that was the story. So Amar Ravina. So now Ravina adds what we can learn from the story of Rebbe and Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi. Shmamina, we can learn from here that he was concerned about what was the waters that when he went to the bath on that Shabbat, what waters was he going to the bath? So he was going Shmamina, and he said that there was a problem. Now the waters were the Tiberia waters, and he was saying even in the Tiberia waters, there's a he said Shmamina Hamavashel the Tiberia b'Shabbat Chayav. The Gemara at this point thinks it means Chayav means actually a chatat, a sin offering if you do a mistake, if you make a mistake on Shabbat. Meaning if you cook Because what did he want to do? He wanted to cook the oil in these waters of Tiberia. He wanted to cook the oils, and he told them, "Don't do it. You have to use a kli sheni." Now we had a discussion early in the Gemara. The waters of Tiberia. Where do they get its heat from? Is it a natural heat? That natural heat on the ground, maybe it comes from the sun or whatever it is, or is it from Gehenna? We had an opinion in the Gemara that says that Hell, that the waters of Tiberia runs by the entranceway of Gehenna, the fires of Gehenna. How do you like that, David? It's a wild, right? And if that's the case, right? You know what, right? And if a person would cook with that water, it would actually be a biblical prohibition of its fire, meaning
So why did they allow them to go?
right. So we hold that it's not water of Gehenna. We don't hold that way, but the Gemara wants to suggest that this opinion that Rebbe held that these waters of Tiberia were actually came from the fires of Gehenna. Because remember, if it's not from fire, if it's some other source that's not fire, there's no Torah prohibition. There wouldn't be a Torah prohibition, and we actually allow. We said you could go ahead. I mean, let's say the sun. We said you can actually cook an egg in the sun on Shabbat because the sun is not fire, and no one's going to make a mistake between sun and fire, and therefore you could cook an egg in the sun on Shabbat, not on something that was heated by the sun. Right. You can, right. Something that was heated from the sun, you can't because people don't know the source that was heated by the sun. And if people make a mistake and think that a derivative of fire, something that was heated, because we have another law that says the same way you can't cook with fire, David, if fire heated something else up, you can't, there's a biblical prohibition to cook with that item that was heated from the fire. So, I mean, that technically, if you would have a towel, that you heated a towel right by a fire on Shabbat, then you take an egg and you crack an egg onto that towel, and that towel cooked the egg, that would be a biblical prohibition of cooking because it was heated by a derivative of fire.
Wet hot towel wrap a fish in it.
Right. Right, but because you're saying if it was heated from, meaning the towel was heated from, if the towel was heated from the fire, and then I want to put wrap the fish in the towel, if that would cook the fish, because the towel got heated from the fire, that would be a biblical prohibition. Similarly, we're going to have a story. Let's say you have a tea kettle or a pot, and you would pour the contents of the pot out. Now the tea kettle is empty. But if you put water into that empty tea kettle, but that tea kettle got heated up from fire. Now, if you put cold water into that tea kettle, now that's you're cooking the water with a derivative of fire, something that was heated up with fire, and it would be a Torah prohibition. So people, right? So now the Gemara is okay. We're going to continue tomorrow for the next piece. It's already 7:25. Have a beautiful day, everybody. And not yet. I meant it's on my mind. We're gonna get there. Okay, well, we're gonna you too. Thank you so much. No problem. Thank you. Now, one more thing, was the fire on from before, by the way, in your case? It was on from before the fire. It's only a question of the cooking. Okay.
Okay.
I think I have to have the answer before the next Shabbat. That's the deadline. It's great. It's great. No, I want to have the answer. Have a great day, David. Have a great day.